Fantastic. Well, hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for coming on, I think, almost the last session on a sunny afternoon. So as you know, I'm Rita, and I think we are going to have more sort of a conversation style. That's the best way to learn, the best way to go about these things. But as always, those of you who might not know me, I think it would be great if I do a quick intro, Erica does a quick intro, and then we'll get into it. So I'm Rita, founder and CEO of Pioneering People, as mentioned, but I very much like to introduce myself as a startup and social good enthusiast. I love growing things from a small idea into something flourishing with the idea of making a change, whether that's environmental, people, societal, whatever that may be. Alongside Pioneering People, I've also been a UN Women UK delegate for over 4 years, and really enjoy coming together, bringing people together, and having networks like this one. So enough about me. Erica, why don't you give us a quick intro on yourself?
Thank you, Rita. So Erica Farmer, I'm a professional speaker in AI and future skills. I'm a LinkedIn learning instructor, a TEDx speaker. I run a AI training skills business and also a professional speaking business around all things AI. My background is corporate learning and development, and I work quite closely with my colleagues and friends in HR, really supporting them and getting them engaged in all things AI and future skills.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And like mentioned in our mini intro, it feels like the summit should be renamed HR and AI and HR, I guess.
Absolutely.
Which is absolutely your topic. But like we mentioned, there's been a lot of noise about AI and HR at the moment. And I think from my perspective, it does seem to be noise, but also there's some opportunities where they can kind of come together. I'd love to hear from your perspective. What do you think people are fundamentally getting wrong with the two coming together, working together, or in fact taking over one another?
So, well, as in AI and HR?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of what I call analysis paralysis out there. So people don't know where to start with this. It's quite easy to get overwhelmed with all of these conversations around AI. I mean, we've already joked this morning that there should be an AI HR conference, right? Even I get sick of scrolling through LinkedIn and just seeing posts about AI constantly, and I'm an AI expert. I think sometimes it's about doubling down on what we already know and what we're great at. So HR people are great at working with people, owning the people agenda, communicating, negotiating, supporting, consulting, influencing, all of that good stuff. So whether that's AI or whatever else, I think you should really kind of understand how you feel about AI and what your thoughts and fears and all that kind of good stuff is, but never forget that great people in HR are great at what they do. And I think some HR people have forgot that. They have to kind of grapple with the view that, do I need to learn all these terms in HR? Do I need to understand computer science? Do I need to become a techie? No, you don't. You don't need to do any of those things, but you just need to, what I call, be 4 minutes ahead, just slightly ahead, supporting stakeholders, supporting clients, being confident in yourself, but you don't need to become an IT expert with this stuff. Double down on HR.
I love that, and I think it's actually reassuring to the people that are here today, the people that work in HR, and say, if they aren't working in that today, they want to move towards it. But at the end of the day, all of our lives are affected by HR. Whether you're working in an HR department, whether you're looking for a job, etc., it touches us in very many different ways. In your book and in your talks overall, I know that you speak a lot about HR moving from gatekeepers to governors. And I think from my perspective and where I sit, because I'm building a platform that's essentially a HR platform, we do a lot of, finding people, connecting them, making sure they get access to those jobs quite quickly. And I see a lot of different places where I think the system is a little bit broken or fragmented. Otherwise, I wouldn't have started, but not enough to start a tech business myself. I'd love to hear kind of from your perspective, do you think that AI is giving HR more power? Or do you think the opposite? Do you think that actually what AI is doing is exposing those gaps even further? The saying to the industry or to the sector, these are the problems, we can highlight them, and you actually have to make a move or run for your money?
Yeah, probably the latter. AI is shining lights on lots of areas that historically have had problems, whether that's leadership capability, whether that's HR confidence, whether that's processes, whether that's a great recruitment process or a poor recruitment process. It's really in the position where we've got nowhere to hide with this stuff. It's exposing data. It's exposing information that actually we could hide a little bit before. And actually that's creating opportunities for startups, for people to understand, actually, it's about time that we really get our ducks in a row and understand what great looks like, even though we always talk about this stuff. Again, there's nowhere to hide now. So it's not the poison chalice. It's actually an opportunity for us to understand that we need to build great foundations in our new HR operating model, whatever that looks like for the organization. But also, we've got to maybe take some of our own medicine and look internally a little bit with this stuff and work with great suppliers and collaborators and providers. If there's a great platform out there, let's work with that great platform. If there's great AI spec in that, let's work with that rather than trying to do everything internally ourselves.
Precisely. I think that's a wonderful point that you've just mentioned and actually shone a light on, is what AI is actually allowing these systems or these people in the sector to do is to do their job. I think before we threw everything that we didn't want to do, that we couldn't do to the HR department, look at it. But actually, if you define what that is human resources at the end of the day. They're looking at the human side of things. They seem to be looking at a lot of other operating things, etc., etc. So at the moment, they're actually able to cut that fluff, or I guess outsource those fluff and those things that they didn't want to do, and focus again on their actual job. So could look at it in a very fantastic and very positive light, whereby it's a time for them to go back to the origins of why they started that role and focus on their skills and what they're good at and get rid of the rest. I want to turn again back to your book. I think it's fantastic, and something that I just want to mention is I've obviously read a little bit about it, and I think what you frame quite interestingly is seeing AI as a colleague. And I guess from there, would you say that leaders are actually risking too far or going too far with it? Not just using AI, but actually starting to outsource judgment to it. Like I said, I think a lot of the fluff and those tasks perhaps that we didn't want to do are going that way. But what would you say in terms of sourcing that judgment, that decision making, rather than going to your board or your investors, etc., that feels like a more comforting place to go because it feels like a secret between you and it. What is your perspective on that? And would you say that's the way that you see it as a colleague, or in a completely different manner?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about AI being your additional headcount, your digital colleague, sometimes we just want someone to bounce ideas off, and we shy away from that because that person's busy and we don't want to interrupt them, or, we've got to wait for a meeting, or we've got to wait for our manager to be available and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of that wastes time, whereas AI can now be that digital colleague that you can bounce ideas off. You can ask it for feedback. You can ask it to look at your strategy and suggest what the blind spots might be. You can do some coaching with it, some tutoring with it. You can practice some skills with it, for example. We now have access to something that's completely democratized, which seemed to be quite elitist before, particularly in things like coaching, because it was all budget affected, really. And really, that just meant the senior team that gets coaching, or the -1 or -2 layers, if we're really lucky. Now, the mindset here really has to be, how can it enable me? How can it make my personal life easier or my professional life easier? It can't be, what can I just outsource everything to so I have the lazy life? And I hear people say all the time, AI is going to make you stupid. AI is going to de-skill you. AI is not going to do anything unless you let it. We are the human intelligence. We're in charge here. The robot overlords aren't with us yet. We're not plugged into the matrix. So it's our accountability to be able to own that. And what comes with that is reshaping our jobs and being able to do more of what we love doing and less of what we don't like doing. But there's an accountability that sits with us as individuals of partnering with our digital colleagues, our AI, in the right way. And organizations need to invest in the mindset and the skill set and give people the time to digest how they feel about AI. Because I started talking about digital colleagues 2-3 years ago, and people would look at me like I was the devil. Like, what are you talking about, a digital colleague and a blended team and all that? But that's happening now. That's been happening for the last 12 to 18 months. We're seeing AI as part of org charts, for example, and things like that. But we've got to be responsible in doing that the right way.
I think that's a wonderful perspective. And like I said, I think a reassuring one. And a lot of these conversations and many that we're hearing is actually removing that negative persona or that negative perspective that we're seeing and that we're hearing a lot in the media that I guess is wonderful clickbait at the end of the day. But actually seeing that a lot more with education and knowledge around what it is, what we can do, and what the next steps with it can empower you in very many different ways. You touched on something that I'd love to also talk about, which is the giving back of the time. And controversially so, I always like to ask a little bit of a difficult question. If you're saying that AI is giving us back time and taking all these things, from us, why are we not already seeing better workplaces if it's moving so quickly?
That's the question. That is the question. And for me, speaking to lots of people, engaging with lots of organizations, working with lots of HRDs who've been burnt by this, people aren't adopting AI because they've grown up with a narrative that it's going to take my job, or someone who knows how it's going to use AI is going to take my job. That's not actually what the information we're seeing in the research is now. It's more about reshaping. But therefore, why would I learn to use a technology that's going to make me quicker? Therefore, you're going to give me more work to do because I'm doing the work I already do in a faster pace. So I always talk about kind of widgets, whatever your job is, the widgets that you do in your job. Like, why would if I'm 15% more productive by using AI, you're just going to give me more widgets to do. So I'm going to get burnt out quicker. It's a sunk cost fallacy. It's not the right thing to do. Whereas motivate me, get me to be more productive and quicker, but then enable me to use that time for personal development or, God forbid, finish work early and spend time on my well-being or my family or my friends or whatever that might be, something that makes me excited and sets my soul alight. I'm going to be more motivated to come back into work if I'm excited about that other stuff. I call it the AI dividend. I spoke about it earlier. How can you help me as an employer or HR find out the what's in it for me, get excited about my partnership, my collaboration with AI or my digital colleague? That might be that time enables me more headspace, more time to rest because I've got a health condition, more time to spend time with colleagues or doing more work that I enjoy doing. I'm there going to want to give back more because you've invested in me and my AI dividend. You're going to get more out of me that way anyway. We know this stuff. This isn't an AI thing. But for some reason, organizations are kind of saying, well, we want you to be faster, more efficient. We want you to use AI for X, Y, Z. As an employee, I don't care. Like, I'm more interested about how I pay my mortgage at the month, how I go on holiday, and how I spend time with my family. Let's have that conversation. So,
yeah, I guess, and that's a wonderful perspective. And actually, part of what the culture that I'm trying to build in my startup, it's a very small corner of the world. There's not a lot of us, but actually a big thing for me of becoming founder was actually building a company with culture that is, you do your job, you get the job done, and you can leave. Whether that is you finish at 11 a.m. because you are remarkable at using AI, or actually 4 p.m., that does not matter. So we have our core working times, which is 10 to 2. Whether you start at 7 a.m. like I like to, and then have the afternoon to myself, or you're somebody that you can't get out of bed before 10, 11 a.m., that is not my business. As long as you finish the task that you've got to do, you're going to kind of move forward. But I guess it's easier said than done. And I think that's easier said than done, especially in a small startup when you know each other, the trust is really strong, you see each other, and actually you've got a completely different relationship. I'm actually friends with everybody. Well, I like to think I'm friends with everyone that works in my startup. They might not think the same, but I really understand them, and I understand the way they like to work, the way they don't like to work, what they're really good at. A perfect example was when we were doing our demos for our new website or platform. I thought it was going to take this one particular worker 3 days. I was like, I need all the demos, subtitles, X, Y, Z. We need to look fantastic. And at the end of day one, she was like, I don't know if this is dumb to admit, but I've actually done all the work. What should I do for the next 2 days? And that for me as a leader was very difficult. I went, technically this task was meant to take 3 days. She's done it in one because she knows what she's doing with AI, but what do I do next? I think it's that internal battle. If I'm having it and I'm not spending millions on my workforce and payroll, how do other companies feel and how do they kind of overcome that? And for me, I kind of decided to hit the middle ground. I said, look, tomorrow you can kind of have a day where look at your tasks, do a bit of a brainstorm, no meetings, nothing heavy, but we kind of need that other day back because at the end of the day, for me, every single minute and every single hour does count. But what would your perspective be, and how, as a leader, can people deal with that kind of difficult decisions for their company?
And it is difficult because we're so used to clocking in, clocking out, or we feel that if that person is taking the 2 days back because they've completed the work, like that doesn't feel right either. You know, there is an absolute balance, and that does depend on your company culture, but we have to step away from micromanagement. We have to your point, be outcomes based, quality based. We have to step away from an economy of knowledge, because that doesn't exist anymore because of democratization through large language models, and step into the culture of value. You know, what is the value that your people are bringing to you through partnering with AI? And actually, if they are more rested, that's going to be a better output in terms of value. Now, it might be a negotiation of, right, well, you save 2 days, I give you a day back, but I want you on a day doing something else. Or sharing with the rest of the team how you've been so great, as long as the quality of what she has been producing is great. How can you share that? How can you spread that across the organization? What have you learned? What's the reflections? If you're great with AI, how can you train other people to do similar things? But we can't reprimand people for being more effective and adding more value just because it's quicker, just because they've found a way, as long as it's not a workaround that's incongruent with the company's AI guidelines, for example, or the behavioral framework of the way that's working. So you got to check yourself in regards to, like you said, it was you had to battle with that internal fear as the leader, and everybody will have that as well in that space. But ultimately, big picture, what's the value that's being brought, and how can they share that across the organization? You got to have that self-awareness to understand how you feel about that, and not just be reactionary and give that person more widgets, because that person's going to go, I won't bother next time then.
Fantastic response, thank you. I know we've only got 2 minutes left, and I want to ask one very important wrap-up question, and I guess why we're all here today and for the last 2 days is, I'm quite curious, in your eyes, what would you say in the next 2 or 3 years good HR is going to look like?
It depends who you follow, who you look to, what your culture is. So I follow people on LinkedIn who will kind of go rip up the rule book, like start from scratch. OD has to look very different now, organizational design, because the future of work could be everybody's just dipping into a pot of tasks, which is dictated to based on customer need or strategic goal. That's what the future could look like, rather than having silos of job descriptions like we typically and traditionally have. I think we're going to be in that state of flux for the next 2 years. I say become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is a little bit of a cliche, but it feels true, because you know, we're not going to be in that space anymore that this is my job and this is what I do, or I'll do this with AI, but I won't do. You're not going to be in a job very much longer, because your organization is going to be so fluid in regards to where it goes over the next couple of years. And we're used to the typical 3-year cycles. Like I used to work in corporate, and it would go local, global, center of excellence, on site. You know, we used to go through those cycles all the time. Those cycles are going to be like 6 months. They're not going to be 3 years anymore. So we need to be really clear in terms of our own skills around critical thinking, being able to say, stop, is this the right thing to do? But also learning agility. I need to pick up those skills right now and deploy them in record time, because that knowledge and skills that I've always done doesn't serve me anymore. So our mindset is the thing that's going to take us forward, particularly over the next couple of years. And organizational design is going to look massively different, because as AI grows and automates whatever those tasks are going to be, we've got to be able to drop those tasks, but then upskill to add more value in our roles, or potentially there's a challenge there.
Fantastic. Well, we could sit here all day, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I think that deserves a round of applause.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.